Greetings and welcome to Of Scribes and Men. I am your host Sam. I am the Mad Poet, or you may call me the Mad Poet of thousands, soon to be 10,000. I was going to wear this top hat, but not for these videos. These videos I'm going to get a little bit more relaxed, I suppose, ish. If you want me to wear the top hats for the next one, by all means, let me know. Or, dress up in something similar to what I usually do for my short form performances. I digress. So, if you don't know by now, I am on a journey to reach 10,000 poems by November of 2026. As long as I hit it sometime in November, I will have accomplished my goals. I'm gonna lay out that rule right there. It doesn't have to happen on November 1st. As long as it happens before December, and I get them out, just to give me a little leeway, and I'll explain why. 10,000 is a lot. It's more than any poem that any poet has ever written in the modern age that I am aware of. And trust me, I have done the research. A lot of it. It's become an obsession. So yeah, I was initially going to start this with 1,000, but then I forgot, and then I just said, "Oh yeah, I need to do this for the 2,000," and so here we are. Here we are. So. First things first, once again, if you haven't been paying attention, I started this journey on July 1st, on Canada Day, specifically, and I wrote out, literally on that day, 100 poems. I was exhausted after that, yeah, and it kind of threw me back, because writing 100 poems in one day, in 4 different forms, one of which I had learned Tanka that day, just throwing that out. I had learned a new poem literally, I wouldn't say on that day, because the day prior to that I practiced it, and then on the day of, that's when I wrote 25 of them. I did the practices so that I could get down what I wanted to do. So the first start put me behind, and I still am behind. I should have been at 3,000 by now if I'd been following the original schedule, but life happens, job, all the things I was part of. Like, I initially planned to have 100 done when I went to teen camp as a counselor. That didn't happen. I got maybe 15 done, but when you're dealing with a bunch of teenagers and you're a cabin leader, getting the free time to push out everything you thought you were gonna, nothing happened. Then I went to a con, I had a whole setup planned for the con. Barely anyone interacted. That's fine. I still managed to get some of my poems out, which I did handwrite. I'm just trying to figure out where that deck of cards is, because I had index cards, right? I wonder if I have one as an example that I could show. No, I don't. Actually, no, I don't. So I had these index cards, and anyone who came up to interact with me and put makeup on my face or write something in my book, they got a poem. There was a different plan, which I'm going to keep a secret because that's for a different channel. But when I was doing that, I think I ended up writing something like, I want to say, on index cards alone, did I have 100? I did 25, 25, 25, 25. Yeah. I believe I did 100 on index cards. There are, I'm going to say this right now, there are a handful that will not appear in any of my volumes. I don't even know what they say anymore. Whoever has them has a 1 of 1. So if any of this becomes anything, they have a 1 of 1. That's that's where we are. Um, I probably will do that again at some point for other cons that come up. The other thing that I started to do was knowing that I was going to write 10,000 poems. I wanted to learn as many poetry styles as I could. Forgotten poetry styles, non forgotten poetry styles, difficult poetry styles. So I started doing a bunch of research, started asking a bunch of questions from, obviously Google and yes, even ChatGPT, because once again, I wanted to know how many forms there were out there. So basically, I would ask my question, and then I would research that style, then I would practice it, and then I would ask another question. I would research it, go through a bunch of different blog posts, go through a different bunch of poetry channels, try and get like the feel for the poetry. There is. If one were to ask me which poetic style, because I know 31 now, if one were, or maybe it's 35, I can't remember what I'm up to. I'm in the 30s. I need, is it 33 that I'm up to now? 33 poems? I feel like I'm missing something. Maybe it's 35? Somewhere between 33 and 35. And the irony of that is I probably would have done those two recently, and I can't remember what form they would have been. And that bugs me. Because now I need to go and figure that out. Even though I have started naming all the forms that I'm doing. Okay, so that was my first story to sound like a person with ADHD or whatever. I promise you, I do not have it. One of the first mistakes I made was when I was going through the first 1,000. I did not properly document what style each poem was until I was going towards my 2,000s. And when I was halfway through my 2,000s, I paused and I went, wait a minute. Considering the amount of poetry I am writing, will anyone know what style this is if I don't mark it down? Sure, they'd be able to figure it out eventually, but in order to not make it a headache for both them and me, I started going back and essentially fixing that issue so that I would not run into that problem. I still have not finished the majority of the volumes because it takes time. The volumes between 1 to 10, I think I've done, I want to say up to 7. Up to volume 7, so that means I have like 3 more volumes to do on like naming the forms and whatnot. So even though you won't see that on video, if I were to send that document right now, they would all have the forms written beside the number so that people would understand what style I'm going with. Is this a thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to dabble? Tell me, does any dabbler write hundreds, if not more than hundreds, of any one specific type of poetry form? The answer is no. No, they do not. I do not dabble. I completely embrace every new poetic form that I discover and make it part of my, I guess you could call it, poetic identity as a mad poet. Anything that I learn, I like to continue using and learning and improving on. I find that people have been not giving poetry enough credit, and so they will stick with one form. Maybe they'll go up to 5. If they're feeling especially bold, they might go beyond 5. But a lot of the times people refuse, whether it's due to what they're being taught or having absolutely no need for it, because there was a need for me to do this. And I'll explain that in a minute if you will. And that was because of just how things are. I myself feel like poetry should be more of a playground. When an artist draws, they learn different techniques, different art styles. Yes, there's going to be one that they typically go to and all of that. But an artist typically practices over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And they may have one completed drawing from like a year ago, and then that same drawing you'll see the before, and they'll like put the year and they'll show what the drawing was about. And then the after, and they will show the new and improved drawing. And I feel like that is something poets don't do. And that bugs me, because how else are you supposed to get good at poetry and write poetry, complete poetry, if you do not write it? Bad, good, whatever. Just write the bloody thing. Don't look at the pen or the music and be like, I need to like be in the right feeling with a glass of wine and serenaded with music, or I won't feel it unless I embrace the moonlight and know how that moonlight truly feels when it shines down upon my... No, stop that. Do not wait for the muse, because then the muse will make you there instead of you making the muse your... So, I am of a different sort, where I will just summon things and I will keep writing to an obsessive degree, which is why I find poetic forms to be more of a playground to adopt, because you've got all the tools there, you've got all the forms, all the everything, and they are tools in a sandbox that any poet can play with consistently, continually, onwards. But they don't. And that's okay. That is their journey. My journey is this, and the reason why I am exploring so many different forms and not dabbling in them is because when you're writing 10,000 poems, it would be boring if all those 10,000 poems were nothing but free verse. I primarily do rhymed free verse, usually has some kind of system behind it that other free verse doesn't, but every free verse poem that I do is always rhymed, usually in an ABAB, or not an ABAB, AABB scheme. Sometimes I'll do ABAB, but like I continue like more AABB type rhyme scheme, because that's what comes to me the fastest and what I'm most comfortable in, if you will. So there is that. Then there is the exhaustion. I know this is going to come up at some point, but it's a question of burnout. How do you not burn out when you have written so much and continue to write so much? You need breaks. I'm just going to say it as it is. If you're functioning at a high velocity, high speed type of way, there are going to be times where you will slow down. That happens to me every single time I complete the next 1,000. There's usually a lull within that week of, or maybe even 2 weeks, where I'm not getting as much written down as I should be. Is this a bit of a problem? Yes and no. It allows me to rest, but also I have to like fight the procrastination or the distractions that come along my way during that time period when I am resting, because that can be a thing. So I have to kind of like pull myself out and like get back into it so that I can get back into the rhythm of things. I do have a system that I use specifically for volumes 9, 19, if you have been paying attention, so volumes 9 and 19 have a specific formula, and then there's going to be one more that is also going to have a very similar formula, but I'll leave that for your guesses and a future video when it drops. The other thing is that every 10th has a kind of poetic style or theme. So, for example, when I hit my first 1,000, the volume 10 is basically what I'm most comfortable in, which is free verse, what I've invented, which is Ascendra, and Gavilan. Now, I did not invent Gavilan when I started this challenge. That was already invented in May. So Gavilan was my first invention, Ascendra was my second, because once again I'm going through volume 2. I'm tired, and both ones came when I was tired. I'm just gonna be honest. Both poetic forms that I invented came when I was exhausted, and I wanted, like, I wrote something, and then I was like, wait a minute, what happens if I, and then I'll go, hey, is there anything like this in the poetry world? And then I would find out, no, there in fact is nothing like that in the poetry world in the rules that I have written. So that was fun. Are they simple? Yes, but also no. It depends on how you write them and how far you go, because they're word based, not syllable based. And once again, the rules are up in the places that they're up. Even on my YouTube channel, you will see the rules for each, but especially on my Instagram channel, which also under Of Scribes and Men, the 2 rules are very much pinned. So it's not like they're hiding or anything. I have written down and posted the rules for, people paying attention. Ascendra is the one that continually gets more and more complicated, because it starts with 3 words, then it goes to 4 words, then it goes to 5 words, then it goes to 6 words, then it goes to 7 words, then it goes to 8 words, then it goes to 9 words, and so on and so forth, for as long as you can make it. But you have to end each line on a monorhyme that can't repeat. So basically, if the last word of one part of the poem is fire, you can no longer use just fire at the end. If you were to say put in desire, you could write in sire, but you can no longer use desire. So you can't use that exact same word by itself again at the end. It always has to be with something else, or like written in another word, if you will. So basically, you can use at, but you can't use at again, but you can say that, right? Just, that's a simple explanation. And then it has to be, I decided it had to be a minimum of 4 lines. That's where it's simple. That is where it is simple. Where it gets difficult is every time you make it one step further than the 4th line, and it keeps going for as long as you can make it cohesively work together as a poem, because it has to have a story, has to have a thematic concept. The rules are up, you can read through them. So yeah, that I did for volume 2. That came out when I was doing volume 2, was Ascendra. How I came up with the name was basically you're ascending, what kind of sounds kind of cool, and I was like, ascending, and then I was like, I would ask questions, and I'd be like, what would be the draw means nothing. It's just a cool way of calling it an ascending poem. That's what it is. It's an ascension poem that I have decided to name the Ascendra, because that's what sounded romantic and kind of cool to me. So the dra doesn't come from anything, unlike the Gavilan, which is 2 words. It is Gavaya and Lin, or line, or linum. So basically it means a poetic line. That is it. That's what Gavaya means a poetic line. So volume 10 had those two, the things that I invented, and free verse, which is what I'm most comfortable with. Volume 20 is, of course, as you have seen, the Japanese forms. Volume 30 will be Korean. I will just say that right up. I will not spoil what volumes 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100 will be. Yes, I have written them down. Yes, I have teased some of them. Yes, I know exactly what all but one is going to be, which is kind of like, okay, we'll see where that goes. So I do have a system on every 10th or 1000th poem that I've done. So then the other thing is, I read. First of all, I have written more than Emily Dickinson. That is not a lie. But for proof, I have read now over 2,000. Well, I've read 2,000 poems. I have read 2,000 poems on this channel for people to go and see. And that is also very tiring. Speaking for that long, especially on days where I'm like, shoot, I forgot to get this video out, I will spend like an hour to 3 just reading out volume. And sometimes what you will see, like in volume 15, is times when I am falling asleep and I'm trying so hard not to fall asleep, not because the poems aren't interesting, but because I myself am exhausted. There are so many times when I get exhausted, especially when I try and set self-limitations on myself, like trying to hit 2,000 before October 31st was, which meant that I was getting less sleep than I should have been getting. I was tired. I was so tired. I was like, we're talking like 4 hours of sleep for most days, trying to get all these punched out because I was behind and I was like going, crap. I made it on November 4th, but it wasn't my October 31st. So I have a hard time hitting hard set day goals, which is why I don't expect it on November 1st. Because anytime I say, oh yeah, I will have this many by this point, I fail. Every time. Without fail, I will fail. So that has been... I try not to give set deadlines like that. I know that within the month that I need to get a certain amount written. I know for December, I'm going to need to have a certain amount written. I know for January, I'm going to need to have a certain amount written, and so on and so forth. By February or March, I should have around 5,000 written, for example. That's kind of like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the kind of mentality where I'm going like, okay, by this month I should have this, by this month I should have this, by this month I should have this. And sometimes my calculations are off because life happens, work happens, everything happens, and I'm either tired, distracted, or whatever. And it doesn't happen as I had planned. Much to my dismay. If I was given, like, if this was my job, if I was getting paid to do this, if I was in some kind of something that's like, okay, no, we're going to help you with literally everything else, just create. Yeah, I'd be punching things out a lot faster than I already am. And the other thing that I found is that I do have to write a lot of short poems in order to make up the time. Well, it's not that I don't write long poems. I do write longer poems. I just have to write the short ones, but the bite-sized pieces. And I'm not just talking haikus, I'm talking like free verse, so that I can get the volumes done at a rapid pace, because once again, I don't have the time to consistently write the longer forms. and I have a time limit. That time limit is November next year. So does that bug me sometimes? Yes, I will say that that does bug me sometimes, and I do struggle with that. They are complete poems. Can I expand on them? Yes, just like I can expand on most other things very easily. I could expand on each and every single one of them, but they are complete poems, and I do not have the time to go as further as I like. The other thing is that when I do these videos, or when I do like the other, like the short form videos, it takes out time from writing poetry, and then I might be tired from like either doing that video or editing, or I might get distracted or whatever. And then it's like, okay, there's this, there's that, there's this, there's that, there's this. So I'm bouncing between, and anytime I'm in a flow, I can't do videos, which also includes short form. But anytime I'm doing the videos, which includes the short form, I can't write the poetry. Like, I can't be in two places at once. So there's a bit of conflict of interest there, and I do like a lot of that would be solved if I had more time. So there's that. I used to think that this was going to be a lot easier than it was. Um, Not that it's terribly difficult. It's just, how do I put it? It's more of an endurance thing and time-based thing. That's where it's the hardest. Is the endurance and the time it takes to do something is what usually gets in the way. Is how much endurance do I have? How much time do I have? Am I letting anything else distract me, get in my way, yada yada? And there is, because I can't always obviously be writing, and I can't always, obviously be doing. So there's always something that's like the daily things kind of get in your way, and it's a lot of endurance, training, running, whatever you want, writing. Why do I record each video when I'm done the next 1,000 instead of like send it off somewhere or like try and self-publish it, which once again, don't have time for. Do not have time for. I discovered that along my journey, is that I do not have time to stop and figure out publishing, which publisher to send it to, how to self-publish, how to get the art for this, or all the nitty-gritty details. In this challenge, I don't have time for that. I can't slow down and be like, hey, have this entire volume. What I do have time for is sitting down and reading each one of them out until I can send them out as volumes or books or anthologies or whatever you want. Anthologies, sorry, not analogies, anthologies, whatever you want to call it. Until I can do that, I'm doing what is fastest, what is easiest, what is most accessible to me, so that I'm not slowed down horrendously. So that's why I read out the poems. To show a documentation that it was I and not anybody else. To show that, like even my writing videos, to show that I am the one writing them. To show, like, it's basically irrefutable evidence that I am the author of these poems. Now, some people, especially in the AI culture that we are in, might go and say, oh, well, this is AI. If this was AI, I would not be this tired. My tired, like, look at my face. Look, if this was AI, this would not be where it currently is, okay? So yeah, rest is something I struggle with. There's obsession and then there's rest, and those two tend to clash. And okay, I will say this: anytime you come across a poem that talks about the sleep, the Sandman, dreams, like, dreaming, not like the dreams you have for the future, anything that has to deal with being unconscious, wanting to sleep, the bed, pillows, Sandman, any of that. That is when I am barely awake. That is when I am falling asleep at the keyboard. That is when I will have 2 lines written and I am struggling to write the next 2. Not because I can't write the next 2, but because my body is physically shutting down and my obsession is telling me to finish it. And no, I'm not that great at regulating myself. I will just say that it should be very clear I'm not that great at regulating myself. So, yeah, there's that with all of this. And then, lastly, I guess should be the why, because I feel like a lot of people will have that question. And there are 2 reasons why. One, as a Christian, I believe in eternity. And if I'm going to be in eternity, why aren't I doing things that are going to continue on into eternity right now? Why am I not doing something that I want to be shown throughout eternity, using the gift God gave me, and doing that right now, which will carry over? Right? The second reason is to test the limits of human creativity, specifically my creativity. What are my limitations? What are my boundaries? Things that I've learned, so on and so forth. Where I'm at, how much can I do? How much am I sacrificing? Which is a lot more than I thought. There's usually I, sit down and play some games or watch some anime or, do some other geeky things. That has largely been thrown out the window because I'm writing instead. Just how it is. Spending time with friends, going and doing stuff that I normally would have had time to do. Can't do that because I'm busy, more often than not, writing. And because I have a job and all of that, I have a limited time window in which to get as many poems done per day as I possibly can, which is usually more than 10, some days less than 10. I will say that some days, especially after I've done 1,000 videos or 1,000 poems, some days that will dip below 10, dip below 20, because the idea is to write over 20 poems per day. Sometimes that dips. If people were to ask me how many poems in a day I can do, I would argue 200. But that would be me pushing myself to the max. And the reason why I say 200 is because I wrote 100 in a little under 6 hours. So 6 plus 6, if I had 12 hours, that's 200. But a lot of them would be more short form. They're at that point, it'd be do what I am fastest at, and therefore there wouldn't be as much diversity in poetic form in doing 200 than, say, doing 100 in the same thing, or less than 100 in the same time frame, and having far more diversity, so to speak. So yeah, that is why I don't do that, which of course everything comes back to time, but I digress. Do I find this fun? I should really have asked people, which there's not like a lot of followers, so it's not like I can ask anybody for. If you have questions after the 30th volume that you would like to see after the fact, let me know in the comments below. If you've gotten to this point of the video, let me know in the comments below any questions you have in this video. I will answer them on the after the fact of the 30th volume when I get to that in about some point in December. And then lastly, yeah, I was going, do I find this fun? Sometimes I find it fun. Sometimes I find it tiring. I find learning about new forms fun. I enjoy exploring the new forms. I sometimes wish there was like a musician or artist or whatever that brought those forms to life, because I think that would be really cool. But yeah, there are times when I find things fun. And yes, the whole spite for the Sestina thing, that is 100% true. Every Sestina I do is out of spite. It's my least favorite form. I still do it out of spite, but that spite has become fun now. So where does that put me? Anyways, that is going to be it for this video. Hopefully the next one won't drag on as long. I was trying to make up for both 1,000 videos and 2,000 videos. No, not videos, sorry. 1,000 poems and 2,000 poems in one video, to try and think of like everything that was going on that I experienced, where I'm at mentally, all of that. Maybe the next video should be shorter depending on how many questions I get. But with that being said, I will see you guys later. Until then.